Hi guys, I'm going to tell a couple of anecdotes and all the facts regarding carrying proof of identity in Panama. Now, it's law that you carry proof of ID in Panama in the street, in any public place. It could be in the mall, if you're a passenger in a bus, in a taxi. I've been stopped, for example, as a passenger in a taxi. I've been stopped walking in the street. I've been requested on a bus for ID. So these are all places where just randomly the police can stop and check ID. Now what they do when they do that is they take the identity number and they run checks against it to see if anything's outstanding. So for example, if you're a Panamanian and you owe some kind of fine, or you're wanted for something, or even if you're a foreigner and you're wanted, say, for example, you've been asked to give evidence as a witness and you've not turned up, then they can see that in the notes there and they will take appropriate action. So that's why they do it. And they're also checking your immigration status as a foreigner. If you're on a tourist visa, for example, they'll look at the date, the stamp date in your passport. And so it's incredibly important you always make sure they stamp your passport when you enter the country, because otherwise you can end up in a whole lot of trouble, because you can't really establish very easily when you entered and how long you're allowed to stay for. Those are the reasons the police do it, and it can be really quite a surprise. I've lived all over the place and I've actually not used real ID. I've always taken a photocopy of my passport for several reasons. But in Panama I stopped doing that, and I'll get to why in a second. But the reason is that in about 4 years of being here, I got stopped about 3 times. And the first time I had this colour photocopy of my ID, my passport, and I showed it him. There were 2 policemen. There was one who seemed quite senior, and he took it and he radioed in, and my Panamanian friend was with me. He'd already looked at her ID and everything was fine. But with me, he started to say, this is not acceptable. We cannot accept a photocopy. It would only be useful if it was apostilled on the back of it, and in that case he would accept it. Obviously to do that would be quite a costly procedure, and I'm not sure how long it would be valid for, but that is one option you could explore if you don't want to carry your original passport with you as a tourist. So what happened was, he just had a fairly prolonged conversation with me, which was mostly one way, because all I was doing was nodding and acknowledging him. I didn't put up any resistance, I didn't argue, I just gave him a lot of attention and took seriously what he was saying, and he could see that. I'm not sure if he was hoping that I would say anything, or there's some foreigners here who think bribes are appropriate here. I've never had to bribe anyone here or in Honduras, Peru, Guatemala, Italy, anywhere that I've lived. I've never had to do it, and this is certainly not why I'm going to start doing it, which will help to contaminate the situation and cause problems for other people here who also get expected to do that. So the same in Colombia as well. So back to the issue. So from that moment on, I then reconsidered my policy, and since then I've been stopped 2 or 3 more times, showing my passport. They took it out of my hands for a few minutes whilst they did their little bit of research, and then gave it back to me. Another time during the pandemic, I just had to show it because they didn't want to touch it, and they just wanted to see the entry stamp in that case. So being British, we're very anti carrying ID generally. We fought against it ever since the war. It's got negative connotations with what happens in Germany to the people there at the start of the war when they made them carry identity cards. So it really has a kind of negative connotation to us. Then you've got the inconvenience of carrying this thing around. It's getting damaged all the time. So you have this other risk as well, that if you should get robbed, you lose your passport. And then finally, if a policeman does have it, they could possibly use it as leverage if they were looking for something from you. And that's obviously something that you want to avoid happening. So those are the reasons why people don't want to carry a passport, and they're all quite valid. Sorry, there's a few insects taking advantage of me here. It's always good to give to nature. But so those are the reasons why people don't want to carry. The main thing to consider as well if you're in Panama is that whenever you go to a supermarket or any place where you'll use a card, they probably 70% of the time will ask for ID. So you will need to show some original ID, which will be your passport or a cedular if you're a resident. So you do really need it for those purposes, unless you're just going around with pure cash. So just be aware of that. So it really kind of narrows you down to carrying original. Now, to carry your original, I really recommend putting it in a little clear plastic bag, little bag, so it just stops getting scuffed, because carrying it every day can really wear down the cover of your passport, and it takes a lot of damage, and you're getting it in and out all the time to show in supermarkets and places every time you use it. So that's my best tip regarding that. But in a case of a robbery, just consider how easily you can get a new emergency passport just by calling up the consulate, the embassy. It's really nothing. And for the sake of any kind of resistance or stress, you should just be happy to give those items that you're carrying to the person during the robbery, as you try and create distance and think about escape and distancing yourself basically from the situation without causing aggression. So those are the things that are best to consider about robbery. You can always replace a passport, you can always replace a phone, you can always replace even a couple of $100, and there's absolutely no logical reason to endanger yourself in those kind of situations. It can be a bit of hassle, but it's a lot more hassle to not have it when the police ask for it, or when you're in a shop to not have it and be refused payment. While we're on the subject of passports, Panama and police, let me tell you this quick anecdote about someone in my family who came over and they lost their passport in the airport. I always have a saying, like, the most valuable stuff you have on you, the closer you keep it to your body, so that you can't lose it, you can't put it down. So he'd put it down in the bathroom and forgot it. And when he got out into arrivals, he discovered that he didn't have his passport. So for some strange reason, contrary to all the advice which we'd given him, is he contacted the police in the airport and said, "Hey, I don't have a passport." So of course the police need to follow procedure, and they took him and took him to a police station, not even in the airport, and there he was in the police station until our lawyers arrived and got him out. The last thing you want to do when you've not got a passport is tell the police, because no matter how friendly and helpful they are, they're supposed to really follow procedure. You can't have someone walking around with no ID. So, first of all, keep your ID as close to your body as possible. Something that's not on the outside of your clothes or on anything you can take off, or anything you put down on desks and tables and tills. And then secondly, if you do lose it, don't tell anyone, just tell your consulate or embassy, and they'll sort you out a replacement. It's no big deal. Don't do what he did. Caused a huge drama, and actually we were out on a boat at the time, and it really spoiled our day, unfortunately, because we had a member of the family in a police station. We didn't know who he was with, or if he was in a cell, or what was happening to him there. And then luckily we have friends who are lawyers, so they went and sorted it out. But it could have been a lot more complicated and a lot more stressful if we hadn't had the connections and been able to just phone someone straight away and then go down and help him out.